Today I will be talking about information overload and how I used to, and probably still do a little bit, take in too much information without comprehending what I'm actually consuming. And why I believe you must be very weary of this, and a lot of us probably do it more than we think. So, for my example, in the past, I would always try to be listening to like podcasts, like informational podcasts, whether it be like Andrew Huberman or Modern Wisdom, podcasts of that nature. And I thought it was very good for me. I was like, every car ride, I'd put a podcast on. Every single time I was eating, I'd be watching a podcast. I'd wake up, have breakfast, watch a podcast. I was at the gym, I was listening to podcasts, and I thought it was great because I really do enjoy listening to podcasts and getting that information and that knowledge. Um, so I thought it was great. But then I realized I need to spend more time meditating and thinking on those things. When something hits you like powerfully and you're like, wow, like that was good. Like I need to start implementing that, or I need to start doing that. You should, or I started, stopping like listening to the podcast, and then just think about it, meditate on it, reinforce it in my head. And how you remember things is by sheer reps. Like you remember how to an equation because of all the times you do it, or you remember how to spell a word because you spell it out a bunch of times. Things of that nature. So I would just say it in my head over and over again, or just think about it. And I found that to be a lot more beneficial. And instead of just letting that happen and be like, oh, that's some solid information, and then just letting it go into the void and continuing to listen and just feed your brain with more and more information. And same thing with books. I'd read and it'd almost be like trying to check a box. Like, oh, I read this book, I read this book, I read this book in a week, I read this book in 5 days, I read this massive book in 2 weeks. But now it's more of taking my time, highlighting, like rereading passages, and if a passage really does strike me, just put the book down for a little bit or for a while and just think on that, write about it, journal about it, just kind of reinforce that into your brain, because the answer is not more and more and more information. When you already have information at hand that you're not practicing, you're not using, you know, when there's stuff to work on that you already know you have to work on, getting more information into your brain is not the answer. You have to meditate on the things you already know and practice those and practice becoming better at those things instead of just feeding more information and trying to get more knowledge, because you're never going to become sufficient at the things you do know, and they're just going to get lost to the void, and you're never going to remember them, and you're never going to implement them into your life, and you're just going to keep fiending for more information. So that's something that I really try to practice now. And now I don't listen to that many podcasts. Here and there I will, but mostly I just read and meditate on what I read. And here and there, if I see, because I do watch some YouTube videos, like the Daily Stoic, I watched him, and sometimes Robert Greene, and like still podcasts here and there. So I'm not saying you don't need to consume information this way whatsoever. I believe YouTube has been very beneficial for me, and that is one of the reasons I wanted to start posting videos. But now I mostly consume my information from reading, and when something impacts me that I read, I will put the book down and I will meditate on it. And my goal is always to try to take at least one thing away from a reading session or a video or an interaction with somebody, whatever it may be. Like, always try to take one thing away. So I found myself trying to remember like 5 different things, and like just would be too much for my brain and would just end up forgetting all of them. But if I focus on one thing that I thought was truly powerful and truly impactful and meditate on it, reinforce it in my brain, think about it a lot, then I find that sticks. And that's really just my goal now, to find one thing that sticks and to meditate on it and reinforce it. And once it's instilled into my brain and it's like riding a bike, I'll never forget it, then I move on to the next thing. I move on to the next thing to think about, or the next thing to, ponder, whatever it may be. Um, so yeah, I think you just need to be very weary of information overload. And now at the gym, I don't listen to any music or any podcast typically. For a set here and there, like if I'm training if it's a pretty intense set, I'll put some music on, but I never try to just, zone out and just go mindless for a whole workout just with music and podcasts and words just flowing into my head. I wear earplugs and just try to drown out the noise and just make my thoughts louder so I can just think and meditate and really focus on the workout, but then also focus on whatever I'm trying to think about at that time. And this has been very beneficial, I believe, and is helping me a lot, just instilling things that I'm learning into my brain. So I highly recommend you stop listening to as much music, as much podcast, as much YouTube, and just meditate on the things that you have learned that you find impactful. If you hear something and you're like, wow, that is powerful, I really want to start doing that, I really want to start practicing that, you shouldn't just go and drown out those thoughts with music. Get into the car and listen to music, or go to the gym and listen to music, or sit in your room and watch YouTube, or look at your phone and watch Instagram. None of that. You need to sit there and think with your thoughts, or that thing is just gonna drift off into the void and you're gonna completely forget about it. And then in like a month or two, it'll pop up and you'll be like, oh yeah, I was supposed to do that. I should start doing that. And then instantly back on your phone, back to music, back to whatever it is. So that has personally helped me a lot, just sitting with my thoughts and meditating on things a lot more. I hope this video was useful, and I hope you take time to meditate on the things that you find powerful in your life.